The first time Judith saw the old man, she thought he was dead. The evening sun was low over Lagos, painting the sky orange and gold. Cars rushed past on the busy highway, horns blaring. People walked fast along the narrow walkway, heading home with tired faces and heavy bags. And there, on the dusty ground beside the road, lay an old white man. His grey hair was messed up. His expensive ash-coloured suit was stained with dust. His tie was loose around his neck. One leg was half on the walkway, the other still on the road, as if he had fallen suddenly. People were staring, but no one was touching him. A woman whispered, "He was hit by a car." Another man shook his head. "If you touch him now, you'll be blamed. Police will say you did it. Let him be. Maybe his people will come." They all kept walking. Some slowed down to look, then sped up again. A few even crossed to the other side of the road so they would not pass near him at all. Judith stopped. Her heart beat fast in her chest. She could hear the traffic, the shouting, the wind, but all her focus was on the old man's face. His eyes were almost closed, his lips were dry. One hand twitched weakly, then fell still. "Somebody help him," Judith said softly. No one answered. For a moment she felt very small. She was just a 23-year-old poor orphan, in a tattered ash gown, stained with mud from the construction site where she worked as a labourer. She had only one small nylon bag with her and a bottle of water she had bought on the way. She had no money, no power, no family behind her. But the man on the ground, he looked like someone's father. A yellow bus zoomed past, the wind brushing dust into her eyes. Judith blinked, tears forming from the sting. In her head, she heard her late mother's voice, clear and calm, like she was standing right beside her. "Judith," her mother used to say, "never turn your back on anyone when you can help them. Even if the whole world walks away, you must be different." Judith's fingers tightened around the bottle of water. All around her, Lagos moved on. The world was too busy to care. She took a deep breath. Then she stepped off the safe line everyone else had drawn in their mind. Judith walked straight to the old man on the ground. And in that moment, without knowing it, she stepped into the biggest change of her life. That morning had started like any other hard day. Judith woke up before the sun, in the tiny one-room apartment she rented at the edge of town. The room was so small that when she stretched her legs on the thin mattress on the floor, they almost touched the opposite wall. The ceiling was cracked. The window was broken on one side, covered with a piece of nylon to keep dust out. But Judith still whispered, "Thank you, God," as she opened her eyes. Her stomach growled. She had eaten only gari and groundnuts the night before. There was no money for anything better. She sat up, brushed off the dust from her mattress, and looked at the old photo of her mother stuck on the wall with tape. Her mother's smile was warm, even though the picture was faded. "Good morning, Mummy," Judith said quietly. "I will try my best again today." She got ready in silence. She washed her face with cold water from a plastic bowl. She wore the same ash-coloured gown she always used for work. It used to be nice, but now it was weak and old, with patches of dried mud that refused to leave. She tied her hair up in a messy bun and slipped her feet into worn slippers. Judith had a university degree, but nobody wanted to hire a girl with no connection. No uncle in government, no auntie in a big office, no father to help her. So she carried blocks at a construction site instead. By 7 a.m., she was already at the site, lifting heavy cement blocks, mixing sand, and moving water. The sun climbed higher, turning her skin sticky with sweat. Her hands hurt, her back hurt. But she kept going. She needed the small daily pay to survive. Around noon, she took a short break. She sat on a pile of blocks and drank some water. A few of the men laughed and joked. One of them, Tunde, looked at her with pity. "Judith, you are too gentle for this kind of work," he said. "You should be in an office somewhere." Judith gave a tired smile. "Do you have an office for me?" He laughed sadly. "If I had, you would be my first staff." She laughed too, but her heart felt heavy. After work ended in the late afternoon, they paid her small money in crumpled notes. She knew it would barely last, but she still said thank you. On her way home, she stopped at a roadside shop and used part of the money to buy a cold bottle of water. It was hot. Her throat was dry. She wanted to drink it all at once, but something made her stop after a few sips. "Let me keep the rest for the walk home," she thought. She placed the bottle in her nylon bag and joined the crowd walking along the busy highway. Cars rushed by. The sky began to change color as the sun moved down. That was when she saw the circle of people ahead. At first, she thought it was a street fight or someone selling something. But as she drew closer, she saw the truth. An old white man lying on the dusty walkway, and fear in everyone's eyes. Back in the present moment, Judith knelt beside the old man. "Sir," she said softly, "can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, his lips parted, but no sound came out. "He was hit by a car," someone behind her said again. "I saw it. The car did not stop." "Leave him," another voice warned. "Police will soon come. If they see you touching him, they will say you did it." Judith swallowed hard, her heart pounded. But she did not move away. She opened her nylon bag and pulled out the bottle of water. Her hands shook a little as she unscrewed the cap. "Sir," she said again, her voice gentle but firm, "please try to drink." She lifted his head carefully, resting it on her lap so the dust would not get into his mouth. Slowly, she tilted the bottle to his lips. A thin line of water touched his dry mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he swallowed. Just a small sip. But it was something. His fingers moved weakly, clutching at her sleeve. His voice came out in a rough whisper, broken and tired. "Help me," he said. "Stop. A taxi. I locate where I live." Judith looked up. Cars were rushing past. Some taxis slowed as they saw the crowd, then drove off again when they noticed an old man on the ground. Time felt like it was running very fast and very slow at the same time. "Please," she called out, standing up halfway, still supporting his head with one hand. "Taxi. Please, stop." No one answered. She felt anger rise inside her. Anger at the fear, at the way everyone watched but did nothing, at the way they were ready to walk over a human life. With one arm still wrapped around the old man, she stepped closer to the road and raised her free hand high. "Taxi, stop, please," she shouted, louder. A yellow taxi finally slowed down and pulled over, the driver frowning as he leaned over to look. "Madam, what is it?" he asked. "Please," Judith said, breathless. "He had an accident. He is weak, but he can still talk. He needs to go home or to a hospital. I will help him into the car." The driver hesitated. He looked at the old man, then at Judith's dirty gown, then at the people watching from a distance. "If something happens now, they will say it is me," he muttered. Judith's eyes filled with tears. "Please, sir, he is somebody's father. He might die here." The driver looked at her again. Something in her face, the desperation, the honesty, the fear and courage mixed together, made him sigh. "Okay," he said at last. "Quickly, put him inside." Judith did not waste a second. She slipped her arms under the old man's shoulders and tried to lift. He was heavy, and pain shot through her back. But she did not stop. A young boy from the crowd finally stepped forward and helped her, and together they guided the man into the back seat. The old man's head rested weakly against the seat. His breathing was slow, but his eyes were open now, looking at Judith with tired gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. She leaned closer so she could hear him better. "Before I go," he said, forcing his hand into his pocket with difficulty. He brought out a phone with shaking fingers and pressed it into her palm. "Save your number in my phone as Second Chance, because you gave me second chance at life." Judith stared at him, shocked. Second chance. Her hands trembled as she opened his phone and typed in her number. She saved it exactly the way he said, second chance. Then she placed the phone back in his hand. The taxi driver looked back. "Ogre, where are we going?" The old man murmured an address Judith did not fully hear. She stepped back from the car, breathing hard, her clothes now even more stained with dust. The taxi pulled away slowly and joined the traffic. Judith stood there, watching as it moved farther and farther away, carrying the old man whose name she still did not know, and the phone that now held her number. She felt strange, tired, scared, but also peaceful. "I did what you taught me, Mummy," she whispered. "I did not turn my back." The crowd began to scatter. The highway kept moving. Life went on. Judith turned and started walking home, her slippers making soft sounds on the dusty walkway. She did not have extra money in her pocket. She did not have food waiting for her. She did not even know if the old man would survive the night. She only knew one thing. She had tried to save a life. What she did not know was that this simple act, on that noisy Lagos evening, had also just saved hers. Far away, in the back seat of the moving taxi, the old man's fingers tightened around his phone. His lips moved around a name only a few people in the city knew very well. Henry Brown, he whispered to himself. And Judith, walking home in her tattered ash gown, had no idea that the man she just helped was a billionaire, and that soon her small, silent phone was going to ring with a call that would change everything. Judith woke up the next morning with a strange heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes after doing something brave, something scary, something bigger than yourself. Her body still ached slightly from carrying cement blocks, and her palms carried faint scratches from lifting the old expatriate, but her heart felt full. As she washed her face with cold water from her plastic bowl, she wondered if the old man, Henry, she remembered faintly, made it home safely. She wondered if her number in his phone meant anything. She wondered if he even remembered her name. By the time she dressed in the same ash-colored gown and stepped out into the street, Lagos was already awake. Traders shouted, buses honked, and the sun was climbing higher. Judith walked fast so she wouldn't be late for work at the construction site. But when she arrived, something felt off. The site was unusually quiet. Workers were gathered in small circles whispering. Sand piles looked untouched. Buckets sat still. Even the site supervisor, a tall man with a long face and loud voice, stood with his arms crossed, waiting. Judith felt her stomach tighten. "Tunde," she whispered to one of her co-workers. "What is happening?" Tunde gave her a sad look. "Just be careful today." "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the supervisor barked, "Everybody, line up." The workers hurried into a row, some still wiping sweat from their foreheads. Judith stood between Tunde and a woman named Nordzi, who squeezed her arm gently. The supervisor walked down the line, his eyes scanning each person as if searching for something. Then it happened. He stopped right in front of Judith. "You," he said sharply. Judith blinked. "Sir? Come forward." Her legs felt heavy as she stepped out of the line. Everyone watched her, some with pity, some with fear, some with curiosity. The supervisor pointed at a broken block on the ground. "You did this yesterday." Judith's heart dropped. "Sir, it was an accident. The block slipped." Accident?" he scoffed. "Who will pay for it? You?" Judith swallowed hard. She barely had enough money for food, much less for a block. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't pay for damage," he snapped. "You know the rules. If you break something, you pay. Since you cannot pay, go home. No work for you today." The words hit her like a punch. No work, no pay, no food. "Please, sir," Judith begged, her voice shaking. "I need this job. My mother, my life, I have no one. Please let me work. I won't break anything again." But the supervisor looked away. "Go, before you delay others." Her eyes filled with tears she tried so hard to swallow. Tunde took a small step forward as if to defend her, but she shook her head quickly. She didn't want him to get in trouble because of her. She walked out of the site slowly, her heart breaking with each step. Once outside, she leaned against a cracked wall and covered her face with her hands. "No work today," she whispered. "No money. No food." She felt so small, like the world was folding in on her again. Like everything she fought for always slipped out of her fingers. But she couldn't cry for long. She forced herself to breathe deeply and began the long walk home. The sun was high now, hot and sharp. Dust rose around her feet. Her slippers slapped the ground with soft, tired sounds. When she reached her tiny room, she sat on her thin mattress and let her body collapse. She hugged her knees and let the tears fall freely. "Mummy," she whispered, voice breaking. "How do I survive today?" Minutes passed. 10 minutes, 20. She stared at the cracked ceiling, feeling the weight of hunger and disappointment pressing down on her chest. She thought of the old expatriate she helped. She wondered if he was safe. She wondered if he thought of her at all. Then her small phone began to buzz loudly. Judith frowned slightly. She rarely received calls. She didn't even buy airtime unless necessary. The buzzing continued, echoing through her quiet room. She wiped her face quickly and reached for the phone on the floor. Unknown number. Her heart skipped. She hesitated. Then she answered, "Hello?" A calm, gentle voice came through the speaker. "Judith, this is Henry Brown." She sat up so fast her head spun. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. "Sir," she whispered. Are you okay?" "I am alive because of you," he said softly. "Thank you." Judith pressed a hand to her chest. "I am glad you are fine, sir." There was a pause. She could hear something in his voice. Seriousness. Maybe urgency. "Judith," he continued, "I need to see you. Tomorrow morning, please come to number 10, Lakeview Estate. Ask for Brown Mansion." Her mouth fell open. "Sir, I don't understand. I am leaving the country soon," he said quietly. "And before I go, I must see the girl who gave me a second chance." Judith felt air leave her lungs. I will come," she said in a trembling voice. "Good. I will be waiting," he replied. Then the line went silent. Judith held the phone to her ear even after the call ended, her hands shaking. Brown Mansion? Lakeview Estate? An expatriate calling her? Waiting for her? She looked around her tiny room, the cracked walls, the old mattress, the empty plastic bowl. Her life was the definition of struggle. And now, something strange, something unbelievable, something big was pulling her forward. That night, Judith could not sleep. She lay on her side, eyes wide open, staring at the weak ceiling fan that spun slowly like it was half asleep. Every minute felt like an hour. Her mind replayed everything. The old man's weak eyes, the whisper of second chance, the way she had lifted him, the way he told her to save her number. Maybe it was all a dream. Maybe she would get there tomorrow and find nothing. Maybe she would be turned away at the gate. But something inside her whispered, "Go, your life is about to change." She finally slept just before dawn, her hand still clutching her small phone. Before the sun fully rose, Judith was already dressed. She washed her face twice, brushed her hair carefully, and wore the cleanest dress she owned, a faded blue gown with tiny white flowers on it. Her slippers were old, but she cleaned them anyway. She left her house before the rooster crowed. The streets were still quiet when she arrived at Lakeview Estate, the richest part of Lagos. Tall gates, security guards, polished roads, expensive cars gliding past quietly. She stood there, feeling small, but hopeful. "Good morning," she said softly to the guard at the mansion gate. "I am here to see Mr. Henry Brown." The guard looked at her from head to toe. She could see the confusion in his eyes. She looked too poor, too simple, too out of place for a mansion like this. But he checked his list. Then he stepped aside. "Madam, please enter." Judith took a deep breath and walked in. The mansion was huge. White walls, shining floors, tall pillars, flowers planted everywhere. The air smelled like fresh roses. A black Bentley was parked in front, polished like glass. Judith's heart hammered in her chest. She stood frozen on the polished marble floor of the mansion's entrance, her breath trapped somewhere between amazement and disbelief. For a moment, she wondered if she had stepped into the wrong house or into someone else's dream. Then the front doors opened. Henry Brown, alive, clean, smiling, stepped out with a warm cane in his hand, smiled at her like she was the most important person he had seen in years. "Judith," he said softly, "welcome." And before she could speak, he added the words that shattered her world into bright new pieces. "I am Henry Brown, billionaire CEO of Brown Group. And you are the girl I have chosen to reward." Everything in Judith turned to lightning. Her new life was standing right in front of her. "Judith," he said again, his voice gentle, steady. "Come in." Judith swallowed hard. Her legs felt weak, but they moved. Slowly, carefully, like she was afraid that one wrong step would break this moment. Inside, the mansion looked nothing like anything she had seen in her entire life. The ceiling was so high, it felt like the sky. A giant chandelier hung above, shining like 1,000 tiny suns. The walls were decorated with golden frames and paintings of landscapes from around the world. The floor reflected her image so clearly, it looked like water. She held her breath. If her slippers would leave a mark, she didn't want to walk further. Henry noticed her hesitation. "Don't be afraid," he said, smiling. "This is your home now." Judith's heart slammed against her chest. "My home?" she stuttered. "Come," he said, motioning for her to follow. He led her to a long, elegant sofa in the living room. Judith sat carefully at the edge, her fingers tied together anxiously in her lap. Henry sat opposite her, breathing gently. "Judith," he began, his eyes soft but serious. "When I fell on that road, I thought that was the end for me. Not because of the accident itself. I've lived long enough to fight through worse, but because I realized something painful." Judith leaned slightly forward. Henry continued, voice low, almost sad. "For 20 years I lived in this country. I built companies. I employed thousands. But in that moment when I needed help the most, no one came. No one stopped." Judith looked down at her hands. "But you," Henry said, "a poor young woman in a tattered dress. You ran to me." Judith felt her throat tighten. "You lifted me with your own hands. You gave me water before you even spoke. You didn't think of the fear. You didn't think people would blame you. You didn't think of losing your time or your strength. You just helped." He paused. "And people like you, Judith, they are the rarest." Judith's eyes grew warm with tears she tried to hold in. She didn't help him because she wanted anything. She didn't help him because she expected a reward. She helped because her mother raised her to be kind, even when kindness was hard. Henry leaned back slightly. "I have lived a long life. I have everything I need. But there is something I don't want to leave behind: my company, brown sugar, and this home." Judith frowned softly. What did that have to do with her? Henry reached beside him and lifted a black folder. "I sold most of my companies," he said. "I am retiring. I am returning to my country in 3 days. But I refuse to sell 3 things. First, my sugar company. Second, this mansion. And third, my black Bentley." Judith blinked, confused. "Sir, why are you telling me this?" Henry smiled gently. "Because they are now yours." Silence. Not the normal kind. The deep, heavy kind that comes when the world suddenly stops moving. "Sir?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mine?" "Everything," Henry said softly. "All of it." Judith froze. Her ears rang. She stared at Henry as if she didn't understand English anymore. I don't understand," she whispered, trembling. Henry leaned forward, his tone warm, fatherly. "You gave me a second chance at life, so I'm giving you a second chance at yours." Judith covered her mouth with her hands. Her body shook. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Henry stood up slowly, using his cane, and walked toward her. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You deserve more than struggle," he said softly. "You deserve more than pain. You deserve a chance to live fully, not just survive." Judith nodded weakly, tears falling non-stop. "And I," Henry added, "want to see you grow into the woman you were meant to be." Suddenly, a tall man in a suit walked in Henry's lawyer. "Mr. Brown," he said politely, "the documents are ready." Judith wiped her face quickly, trying to look composed. Henry looked at her with a warm smile. "Judith, shall we?" Her voice trembled. "Yes, sir." They moved into a large office room. The lawyer placed a stack of documents on the desk: property transfer papers, ownership certificates, CEO appointment letters, and car ownership files. Judith stared at them like they were glowing. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Madam Judith, once you sign here, Brown Sugar Company will legally be under your name." Judith shook her head quickly. "Sir, I can't. I didn't do anything to deserve this." Henry chuckled softly. "Yes, you did." The lawyer gave her a pen. Her hand trembled so hard she almost dropped it. "Go on," Henry encouraged. With a deep breath, Judith pressed the pen to the first document. Her signature came out shaky, emotional, but she signed. One paper, then another, and another. Each signature felt like a miracle. When she signed the last document, Henry clapped gently. "Congratulations," he said proudly. "You are now the CEO of Brown Sugar Company." Judith covered her face again as tears poured out. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Henry smiled. "Say nothing. Just promise me one thing." Judith looked up, wiping her eyes. "Promise me you will stay kind, even when you become powerful, even when you have more money than you ever dreamed, even when life becomes easy. Promise you will still help people the way you helped me." Judith nodded firmly, voice breaking. "I promise." Henry exhaled with relief. "Good." After that, he handed her a small card. "This is the manager's number at Brown Sugar Company. They will expect you tomorrow. Your new staff will help you learn everything." Judith nearly fainted. Her? A CO? A company with trucks, workers, offices, and factories? Henry wasn't done. "Your room is ready upstairs," he said gently. "My staff have prepared it. You can move in today. And the black Bentley outside the keys are in the drawer." Judith stared at him, shaking. "Nobody in this city believed an orphan could rise," he said softly. "But sometimes God sends a moment to change everything, and you grabbed yours." Judith burst into fresh tears. Henry helped her stand and hugged her gently, like a father hugging a daughter he was proud of. But as she held on to him, overwhelmed with gratitude, fear, and joy, she didn't know something big was still coming. A twist, a storm, a danger that would test her promise, and the kindness that brought her this far. And it would arrive sooner than she expected, because later that night, someone else found out what Henry had done. And not everyone was happy about it. Judith could hardly feel her legs as she stepped out of Henry's office. Her footsteps were slow, shaky, almost floating. Her mind kept repeating the same words: CEO, mansion, Bentley. All mine? She walked down the polished hallway like someone moving through a dream they were scared to wake up from. A maid passed by and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Madam Judith." Madam. The word almost knocked Judith backward. She smiled shyly and whispered, "Good afternoon," her voice barely rising above a breath. She still felt like the same poor orphan girl who slept on a thin mattress in a cracked room. Nothing inside her felt like a billionaire yet. The maid led her upstairs to the guest room that Henry's staff had prepared for her. The room was larger than her entire apartment, back in her old neighborhood, maybe larger than the whole building. A giant bed covered in white sheets stood at the center, soft pillows arranged neatly. There was a wardrobe bigger than the tiny grocery shop near her street. A huge window overlooked the compound, where the black Bentley shone under the sunlight like a jewel. Judith stood by the window, gripping the curtains tightly. Her mother would have cried for joy. She could almost hear her voice. "Judith, kindness never wastes. It always returns." She pressed her lips together, feeling tears gather in her eyes again. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she said gently. The door opened, and Henry entered slowly, leaning on his cane. Judith stepped forward. "Sir," she said, "thank you again. Thank you for everything. I don't even know how to—" "Judith," Henry interrupted softly. "Gratitude is in your eyes already. You don't need to say another word." She lowered her head. Henry approached her and looked out through the window too. "I want to leave this world knowing I left something meaningful behind," he said. "A business built with honesty, a home filled with peace, and now a young woman who understands kindness." Judith turned to him. "But why me, sir? I'm just—" "No," he cut in gently. "Do not ever call yourself just anything. You are brave, you are good, and you helped without expecting anything." She blinked back tears. Henry smiled. "Tomorrow morning I will introduce you at the company. You don't need to know everything yet. You will learn. The managers will guide you." Judith nodded softly. She could feel her heart beating fast with a mix of excitement and fear. "Rest now," Henry said. "You have a big day tomorrow." He left the room slowly. Judith stood still for a long time, absorbing everything. Finally, she sat on the bed and removed her worn slippers. The softness of the mattress shocked her. It felt like a cloud. She lay down and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing between joy and disbelief. She didn't know when sleep finally pulled her in. Morning came with bright sunlight pouring through the curtains. Judith woke up quickly, sat upright, and then remembered. Today, she would be stepping into a company she now owned. She dressed carefully in a simple cream blouse and a brown skirt she had kept for church service. She had worn it so many times that the thread near the waist was beginning to loosen. Still, she tried to smooth it gently and combed her hair neatly. When she came downstairs, breakfast had been set in the dining room: eggs, bread, fruit juice, sausages. She almost gasped. She had never seen such food arranged just for her. Henry stood by the table, smiling. "Eat," he said. "You'll need strength today." Judith sat down, hands trembling slightly, and took small bites, each one reminding her she wasn't dreaming. After breakfast, Henry's driver appeared with a respectful bow. "Madam Judith, the car is ready." "The Bentley?" Judith walked outside with Henry and stared at the shining black car. She had seen Bentleys before on billboards, in YouTube videos, on the streets of Ikoyi, but never close enough to touch. Henry gestured. "Please enter." With shaky fingers, Judith opened the back door and got in. The interior smelled of fine leather, cool and smooth. The seats hugged her body gently. As the car pulled out of the mansion, Judith watched the gates open and felt her old life fall behind them. But she didn't know that someone else stood outside the estate, watching. Someone who had come there early that morning. Someone who did not believe Judith belonged there. The Bentley arrived at Brown Sugar Company, a massive building with glass walls that sparkled in the morning sun. Workers were going about their duties, carrying files, pushing trolleys, loading sugar bags into company trucks. The company logo, a brown sugar cube wrapped in golden light, stood proudly above the entrance. As Judith stepped out of the car, all eyes turned to her. Workers stared. Some whispered, "Who is she? She came with the boss. She looks so young. Is she Henry's niece?" Judith felt her cheeks grow warm. She held her bag tightly and walked beside Henry. Inside, the managers were gathered in the boardroom. All of them stood respectfully when Henry entered. "Good morning, Mr. Brown." "Morning, sir." Henry raised a hand. "Please sit." They all sat. Judith stood beside him, unsure where she belonged in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Henry began, "today I want to introduce someone very important." All eyes turned to Judith. "This," Henry said, "is Miss Judith. She is the new CEO of Brown Sugar Company." You could have heard a pin drop. Mouths fell open. Hands froze mid-air. A pen dropped from someone's fingers. The finance manager coughed in shock. The HR manager's glasses almost slipped off. Two junior managers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Judith stood frozen, her hands gripping her skirt tightly, her heart pounding like a drum. "She will take over immediately," Henry continued. "She is kind, honest, and brave. You will respect her and support her." The managers nodded slowly, too shocked to speak. Judith bowed her head slightly. "Good morning, everyone," she said softly. She didn't know it yet, but everyone in that room would remember that moment for years. Henry spent the rest of the morning giving her a tour, the production room filled with giant machines, the packaging area where sugar was sealed into branded bags, the office section where employees typed on computers, and the warehouse stacked with brown sugar, ready for shipment. Judith asked questions shyly. Henry answered each one patiently. Everything felt new, strange, beautiful. But outside the company, something else was happening, because the person who had been watching Judith leave the mansion earlier was now standing at the company gate, arms crossed, face hard, eyes burning with anger. His voice shook with rage as he muttered, "So this is the girl, the orphan? The one he gave everything to." The man clenched his fists. "He thinks he can leave everything for a stranger. Over my dead body." Without entering, he turned sharply and walked away. Judith had no idea that danger had already stepped onto her path, and before the sun set, she was going to meet this angry stranger, the person who believed he deserved everything Henry gave her, and he would stop at nothing to take it from her. The day Judith officially became CEO of Brown Sugar Company was the same day trouble stepped quietly into her life. She didn't know it yet. She didn't see the storm gathering. But a storm was coming. By late afternoon, the sun was already sliding down the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and soft orange. Judith was still inside the company boardroom, going over documents with the managers. They spoke slowly, explaining things step by step, and Judith listened carefully, taking notes in a small diary she had found in her new office. Although everything still felt overwhelming, she was determined to learn. Suddenly, the boardroom door burst open. Everybody turned. A tall young man, maybe in his early 30s, walked in, breathing hard, anger burning deep in his eyes. He wore an expensive navy suit, his hair neatly combed, his steps loud and sharp against the floor. Judith didn't recognize him, but Henry did. His face dropped. "Daniel," Henry whispered, gripping his cane tightly. The managers exchanged worried looks. The young man, Daniel, kept walking until he stood right in front of Henry and Judith. His eyes landed on Judith and stayed there, cold and hard. "So," he said, voice shaking with fury, "this is the girl you gave everything to." Judith's heart jumped. She felt the weight of danger in his words. He wasn't just angry, he felt betrayed. Henry stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. Daniel, this is not the time. Oh, it's the time, Daniel snapped. 20 years I stayed loyal to you. 20 years I handled meetings, managed your companies, ran errands, followed you like a son. And when you finally decide to retire and hand everything over, who do you choose? He pointed straight at Judith, his finger trembling. Her? A girl you met on the road? A nobody? The room fell silent. Judith swallowed hard. Her palms were sweaty. Her heart raced. Daniel, Henry said calmly. Listen. No, Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Papers scattered. Everyone jumped. She took nothing from you, Henry said. She gave me the one thing you never did, compassion. She saved my life. Daniel let out a harsh laugh. And you think that is enough? Enough to take what I built with you? Judith stepped back, her voice tiny. Sir, I didn't ask for anything. I didn't. Keep quiet, Daniel barked, turning on her suddenly. Judith froze. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Henry stepped forward, protective. Daniel, do not raise your voice at her. Daniel shook his head slowly. This is unbelievable. You threw away everything we built because of one foolish moment. Henry's voice turned firm, steady like a father speaking to a stubborn child. This has nothing to do with business, Daniel. This is about my heart, my peace, my final wish. Daniel's breathing deepened. His shoulders rose and fell with anger. Then he smirked a little, a dangerous smirk. Final wish? He repeated slowly. So you've decided your last wish on earth is to make me watch a stranger enjoy everything I worked for? He stepped closer to Judith again. What is your plan? He said, his voice low and threatening. Do you even know how to run a company? Do you even know what a CEO does? You think this is a fairy tale? Judith's eyes dropped. She whispered, I'm ready to learn. Daniel burst into laughter. Learn? From who? These managers? They answer to me. Henry tapped his cane loudly on the floor. Enough. Daniel looked at him sharply. Henry, he said slowly, either you take all this back, or I will fight her. Judith felt her chest tighten. I don't want to fight anyone, she whispered. Daniel ignored her. You have until tomorrow morning, he said coldly, stepping backward toward the door. Reverse the transfer, give me the company, or you will regret it. Henry's eyes hardened. Get out, he said. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. This is not over. Then he turned and stormed out of the boardroom. The moment the door closed, Judith collapsed into a chair, trembling. Sir, she whispered. Who is he? Henry sighed deeply. Daniel has worked with me for many years. I trained him, guided him, helped him escape poverty. But somewhere along the way, he forgot kindness. He forgot people. All he sees now is control. Judith wiped her tears. He said he will fight me. Henry placed a hand on her shoulder. Let him try. But sir, he is angry. What if he... I am not afraid, Henry said softly, because you are not alone. I will stand with you. Judith nodded slowly, still shaking, still scared. But something inside her, something small, something brave started to grow. She was tired of being treated like she didn't belong anywhere. She was tired of being pushed aside because she had no family or connection. She was tired of being looked down on. For the first time in her life, she had a chance, a real chance, to stand tall, and she wasn't going to let fear take it away. That evening, Judith returned to the mansion with Henry. Dinner was quiet. Judith barely touched her food. Her mind kept replaying Daniel's threat. After dinner, Henry asked her to join him in the study. He leaned on the desk, looking thoughtful. Judith, he said, I have one last request before I travel. Judith looked up nervously. What is it, sir? Henry's eyes softened with a mixture of sadness and warmth. I want you to promise me that no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what Daniel tries, no matter what the world says, you will not run away. Judith felt tears rise again. You will stay strong, Henry continued. You will fight for your place. You will protect this company, and above all, you will protect your kindness. Judith nodded, crying silently. I promise, sir. Henry smiled, gently wiping her tear. Good, he said, then I can rest. That night, Judith went to her room, crawled into the soft bed, and held her small pillow tightly. Her heart was heavy, her mind restless. She whispered into the darkness. "Mummy, please give me strength." She slept with tears on her cheeks. Morning came too quickly. The mansion was quiet. Judith, dressed in her simple gown, tied her hair neatly and took a deep breath as she stepped out of the room. But something felt strange, too quiet. When she reached the bottom of the staircase, she froze. A maid was standing there. Her eyes were red, her hands shook as she held a small paper. "Madam Judith," the maid said, voice trembling. Something happened. Judith's heart jumped. "What happened? Is it Daniel?" The maid shook her head slowly. "No, madam, it's Mr. Henry." Judith's stomach twisted. "What about him?" she whispered. Tears rolled down the maid's cheeks. "Madam, he collapsed in the night." Judith felt her world tilt. "He has been rushed to Lagos General Hospital. They said—" The maid wiped her eyes. "They said it's very serious." Judith staggered backward, clutching the staircase rail. "No, no, no, sir." She didn't wait. She didn't think. She ran out of the mansion, tears blurring her sight, her chest burning, her whole world shaking. She climbed into the Bentley with shaking hands and screamed at the driver, "Take me to the hospital. Please, please go fast." The car sped off. Judith pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing. Daniel's threat was waiting for her at the company, a company she wasn't even sure she could protect. And now, Henry, the man who changed her life, was facing death. Everything she had just gained, everything she just began to believe in, was suddenly hanging by a thin, fragile thread. And Judith was about to face the biggest test of her entire life. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.